As dawn breaks, Birthright's endgame has us confronting Garen one last time. His dragon form is significantly faster, but he foolishly decided to step off his throne, so his bulk isn't actually that much greater. Most importantly, we start much closer, so we can team up for a kill. In fact, we can even afford to add a little finesse in setting up Saizo to cap his level. It'll require some tight positioning, but I think it's what our MVP deserves, and it'll let everyone else contribute as we finish our final chapter. With Saizo's current XP, he needs 2 more kills before defeating Garen to reach level 20. Fortunately, there are several generic enemies around Garen to choose from, with none actually getting in our way. The General is an easy one round, and he can also double the hero after Inspiring Song and Rally Speed. So, as usual, our main concern isn't with combat, but movement and positioning. Like last chapter, I want Izana to both rally for Saizo and use Hexing Rod on Garen. As such, we need to refresh Saizo twice and Izana once, which means it's time for a final double shelter sing. So, ironically enough, this chapter ends up playing out kind of similarly to the first Garen fight. The main difference is that we have a few extra actions thanks to the closer starting positions, and we get a lot more reliability as Garen loses Staff of Void without his throne. If you don't give yourself a last minute side goal like I am, then you have a lot more options for getting the Garen kill, but I still wouldn't say he's a complete pushover. His Dark Breath gives him a huge attack stat and he has respectable speed, so you can't just have any filler combat unit attack into him. Well, at least if you're playing on Classic and with a no deaths rule set. You might think to use Azura to let your boss killer just attack twice, but they would need healing in between and they'd get debuffed by Draconic Hex. The 1 round threshold for Garen after Hexing Rod is just a few points higher than the previous phase anyways, and Draco Skin doesn't even block debuffs. So with just 1 attack from a competent Shuriken user, Garen's kill threshold basically goes right back down to where it was last chapter. You know what, Saizo? You got this.
I'm here to help.
Die. This can't be. No other way.
And that's endgame completed in 1 turn, which puts the run's total turn count at 62. As we go through the final turn counts and character endings, I'd like to give some concluding thoughts on the playthrough. While I'm sure there are many ways to improve reliability and reliance on MyCastle elements, I'm overall pretty happy with how it turned out. I think I got the turn counts as low as I could, and more importantly, I'm glad that every chapter was engaging to put together a clear for, despite playing on the lowest difficulty mode. I suppose you could say that lower enemy density lessened the complexity, but I think if you're truly trying to optimize the metric, then the process should always be intensive, regardless of the setting. This felt especially true with reliability in the mix, as I had to reach the more strict natural damage thresholds over relying on crits, and maximizing hit rates gave every round of combat something further to consider. Also, Phoenix mode wouldn't have saved any turns in a rigged setting outside of maybe a couple chapters, but it did open up a lot of options for getting turn saves while keeping reliability. That said, I'll recognize that by using reasonable reliability as a soft rule, it ended up mostly just being a fun thought experiment, and I have no way to calculate it into my overall success. The expected turn count metric just felt too intimidating to use and plan for, and I wouldn't have been able to do cool strats like 3-turning the Rainbow Sage map and 2-turning both of Camilla's maps. So, no regrets, but if you want to do a run that optimizes for both turn counts and reliability together, you'll probably have to do some things differently. Some easy improvements I can think of are promoting Kagura earlier, not turning Hinata for shove if you don't need it, and selling items you no longer need for more tonics. I'm not so sure training Izama for Rally Luck is worth it for Chapter 17, but promoting Saizo for Chapter 11 might be, if you need to crit the boss and it doesn't mess up his XP for the rest of the run. I would also consider if capturing would help, if you can find the opportunity for Orochi to kill a relevant enemy. There's Cavaliers for a Shelter user, Outlaws that you can promote for an early Movement +1 Bow Knight, Wyverns for more high move flyers and Rally Defense, and Fighters for Rally Strength. Given my loose restrictions though, I'm satisfied with where everyone ended up and the clears I was able to make with them. I've heard the sentiment that route maps are fun for LTC but not when just trying to beat the game, and I think that held true for my run, especially playing on normal Phoenix mode. Just holding forward with Saizo or Ryoma and watching them destroy enemies would be mildly entertaining, but setting up shelter sings, rescues, and lunges to get them to kill everything as soon as possible is where I found the most enjoyment. Chapters 16, 19, and 23 were particularly exciting to plan for, with Phoenix mode on pairing coming into play on top of standard movement tech. I also felt the defeat boss maps where you had to cross a really long distance were cool too, especially Chapter 17, with working around the reinforcement trigger. Alright, now lastly, the team. I've also heard the sentiment that LTCs are fun because basically everyone gets to be used, and other than Felicia, this ended up being true. Not everyone can fill every role, but for the sake of achieving the optimal run, there was a role everyone had to fill. Filler combat was needed in the route maps, and the duel system meant everyone could provide pair-up stats and carry other units around. The biggest example of this being any units with access to a high movement promoted class had a ton of value, especially if they were a flyer. I needed a few units with strong combat, Azura, and maybe a couple shove users, but the other deployment slots were basically all about movements. The most interesting case of this, and probably my favorite unit in the whole run, was Scarlet. Her class access may have locked her from being a 1-2 range juggernaut, but Lunge and Movement +1 opened up some new options for escorting other units forward. And her combat was both strong and flexible, I just had to actually apply it to specific scenarios, since she couldn't get both 1 and 2 range at once. As for combat, Kagero, Ryoma, and Izana all surprised me in their own ways. Kagero was as strong as you'd expect, and while I was worried about her survivability, I just kept finding situations where sweeping a small group of enemies was really important. I also knew Izana was strong, but I kind of figured I wouldn't need him on normal until the final Hexing Rod moments. As it turns out though, some late game chapters demanded more than just a couple 1-2 range sweepers, so he ended up being really important in the few late game route maps. On the other hand, one would expect Ryoma to be the face of the run, but he ended up being in a pretty similar position to Izana. Really important for the late game route maps, but his infantry class just wouldn't let him reach the front lines at my pace. In the end, the MVP was Saizo for sure, with a strong start in Ninja and just the right stat spread to reliably sweep everything while also flying and lunging around in Malignite. And as one last shoutout, I'd like to thank you for making it to the end. As my first LTC and completed project in general, I really appreciate the support for the series, and I hope you were able to enjoy what I made of Fire Emblem's easiest gameplay. If you have any final questions about the run, I'm more than happy to answer them in the comments, but otherwise, yeah, that's the end of my Fire Emblem Fates Birthright Phoenix LTC. Thanks for watching!